ending in the tectum part. The third one is the tracts which are coming from the extremity via the spinal cord and ending within the cerebellum. So, these are spinocerebellar tract, and this is again the different parts, ascending and descending tract. Okay. The major chunk of the ascending tract is two parts, two pathways, dorsal column and anterolateral. Now, the dorsal column, there is one more word added over here, dorsal column medial lemniscus. What does medial lemniscus mean? This medial lemniscus means, as the name itself suggests, their location of the fibers is within medial side within the brain stem, and these pathways, the neurons which fall under this pathway, they carry the sensation of discriminative touch, conscious proprioception, vibration and pressure. And the neurons which fall under this tract, which carry the sensation anterolateral, they are mainly pain and temperature. So, pain and temperature broadly we can say are carried by anterolateral, and almost rest of the things, discriminative touch, 2-point discrimination. Discriminative touch means discrimination between two different points as a separate one, or the conscious proprioception. What is conscious proprioception? Proprioception means position of the body or the joint. Like if you are in a sitting posture or if you are in a standing posture, unconsciously, not unconsciously, subconsciously, you are aware about the position of your different joints, different body parts. If you are sitting, you know there is flexion at the hip joint or flexion at the knee joint, and if you are standing, you are subconsciously aware that there is extension of knee joint and extension at the hip joint, and you are in a standing posture without being aware. That is called as being aware about the different parts of the body with respect to each other. That is the proprioception. Vibration sense, everyone knows what is vibration sense. All these sensations, they are carried via the dorsal column pathway. So, whether it is the dorsal column pathway or the anterolateral pathway, all these both the pathways, they are made up of 3 neuron system. It means there are 3 neurons which complete this tract. First is primary neuron, that is the cell body in the dorsal root ganglia. Like the dorsal root ganglia, if we draw this thing, say over here, this is just imagine this is the spinal cord, and this part is the dorsal. Okay. So, within the dorsal, if I say dorsal root ganglia, these are the fiber, this is the body, that is called as dorsal root ganglia. And as we all know, dorsal root ganglia, they are the bipolar, the peripheral branch and central branch. Peripheral branch was ending at the sensory receptor, the somatosensory receptor. So, whatever the sensation is generated over here, like you are applying any stimulus, painful or temperature, heat or cold, that will generate an action potential in this peripheral branch, and this will be carried, will go over here and enter and will go through the dorsal, this one central branch of the dorsal root ganglia. That is the first one. Okay. Now, the second, that is primary order neuron. Now, depending on whether it is within the dorsal column or within the anterolateral, within the dorsal column, it will not cross over to the opposite side. It will just enter over here and move, ascend upward on the same side, if it is for the dorsal column. And if it is for the anterolateral, I will try to depict the anterolateral via green one, okay, with the green color. It enters, it will end at the same spinal segment or 1 or 2 spinal segment above or below, and then it ends. It means there will be a second neuron, that is the second order neuron. This second order neuron will start from the same spinal segment will cross over to the opposite side and then it will ascend. That is a secondary neuron in anterolateral. But within this dorsal column one, red one, the second order neuron will be within the medulla, within the brain stem. There are the nucleus that is called as gracilis or cuneatus, that we will talk about in detail in the next slide. Okay. So, just remember the second order neuron in the dorsal column starts from the brain stem, but in the anterolateral the second order neuron starts from the same spinal segment and it goes upward. Now, the third order neuron, whether it is the, like say I will try to draw it over here, the green one was for anterolateral and red one was for this thing, dorsal column. Now, these pathway which are in the brain stem, like in dorsal column, this neuron is going over here, first order, second order starts within the brain stem, then it reaches to the thalamus. Say this part is, I will try to blue, this part is thalamus. Okay. So, if we look over here, this red one, this is the primary neuron or first order neuron, and this is the second order neuron. Second order neuron is ending to the thalamus. But if we look at anterolateral, the first order neuron is ending in the same spinal segment and the second order neuron is getting origin from the same spinal segment and it goes and ends on the thalamus. So, we can say the second order neuron of the anterolateral or of the dorsal column pathway, both of them they will end in the thalamus. They will end in the thalamus. From the thalamus, there will be origin of third order neuron, and that third order neuron will ultimately end up at the post central gyrus. Okay. So, that is first primary or first order neuron, cell body is lying in the dorsal root ganglia. Secondary neuron decussates, means it crosses over. In the case of the anterolateral, it is crosses over in the same segment, but in the dorsal column it crosses over within the brain stem. Third order neuron will originate from the thalamus, and within the thalamus the specific part is ventral posterolateral nucleus and end over the cortex. So, one by one we will start with the sensory pathway, whether the dorsal column or anterolateral. So, the same thing which we have covered just now, it is depicted in this diagram. Look, first order neuron in the sensory ganglia, second order neuron in the CNS axon always crosses the midline, and third order neuron in the thalamus. Means this diagram shows this is the dorsal root ganglia, this is the receptor. Pseudo unipolar means it shows there is one branch unipolar, but it bifurcates, that is why it is pseudo unipolar. Peripheral branch goes to the receptor, central branch goes to the spinal segment. Now, this is the second order neuron, the neuron cell body of the neuron number 2 cell body. It is ipsilateral to the neuron 1, it is on the same side, but it crosses over to the opposite side, crosses in the tract or lemniscus, and then it reaches to the thalamus. This is the thalamus, and third order neuron cell body originated within the thalamus and it goes to the post central gyrus of the cerebral cortex, that is formed by the Brodmann area number 3, 1 and 2 at the anterior aspect of the parietal lobe. Now, this shows the anterolateral pathway. If I try to draw the diagram of the dorsal column, say within the dorsal column from this side, the first order neuron will go and reach, suppose this is the part of the brain stem, this part is the brain stem. So, it will end up in the brain stem, second order neuron will generate and crosses over, and then it will reach to the thalamus. So, what does it mean? The second order neuron in the CNS, the axon always crosses the midline. Like in the anterolateral, second order originate in the same spinal segment. As soon as it originate, it will cross over. But in the case of the dorsal column, in the dorsal column, it is not originating in the same spinal segment, it is originating in the brain stem. But as soon as this second order neuron originate, it will cross over to the opposite side. Okay, that is the meaning of this second order neuron in the CNS. Axon always crosses midline.